Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation as part of the ABA LTRC Industry Insight webinar series. The topic this time is Key Sources of Client Disputes and Prevention Measures. Speaking today will be Erica Bursler from Cosmolex. Erica Bursler is the Manager of Customer Success at Cosmolex, developers of a cloud-based legal billing and trust accounting system specifically designed for solo and small law firms. Erica holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration and 5 years experience in the legal software industry, catering to the specialized technology needs of small to mid-sized law firms. She's given numerous presentations on legal technologies such as law practice technology management, cloud computing, and legal billing and trust accounting compliance. The Industry Insight webinar series is hosted by the ABA Legal Technology Resource Center. To stay updated on upcoming webinars or view previous videos, visit ambar.org/Industry Insight. You can also stay updated on legal technology news through our blog, www.lawtechnologytoday.org. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll now begin the webinar.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. As Chelsea mentioned, my name is Erica Bursler with Cosmolex, and today I'm here to discuss the key sources of client disputes and prevention measures. Basically going to run through what are the main areas in which disputes may come up and how do you prevent them or prepare for them. And I will be, throughout several examples, using Cosmolex as a visual so that you can see exactly what I'm referring to in terms of prevention and ways to ensure that these disputes don't become a headache down the line. So the first item that we're going to talk about is what are the nature of client disputes? Well, they really can range and can vary quite a bit. You may have some ordinary items, which a lot of which are even inevitable, and those could just be fee disputes, maybe missed deadlines. Those are kind of bound to happen at some point during your legal career. But then you'll have others that are extremely serious and can be even devastating to the firm, and that's items such as malpractice claims or fraud. And those, of course, are much more serious, but we want to prevent any disputes that may come about, and of course prevention is the key, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, how to prevent all of these various types of items coming up. Now, how can technology help? Well, technology doesn't make you a better lawyer, of course. That is what you go to law school for, and that's what you want to focus on as an attorney, is being a lawyer. However, technology can prevent most disputes from ever occurring in the first place. Reason being is that today's legal software includes a lot of automatic systems that you can rely on in order to catch errors, trigger warnings about deadlines or even conflicts, and also to remain compliant. These items are very, very difficult to stay on top of yourself, especially conflict checks, all the deadlines that you have across your entire firm. You want to be able to have those reminders in place, and technology can definitely help with that. So now let's walk through a few examples of disputes and how technology can help in prevention of all these different situations. So first and probably most common is definitely fee disputes. And unfortunately, there is an industry reputation of poor billing practices, just in general in the law industry. Now, our reason being, of course, is our society gives lawyer fees a bad rep. Either the invoices are always questioned, saying, what is this fee for? What is this line item they're talking about? And also, many people are advised to pay their lawyers last. You know, keep putting it off and putting it off, and that, of course, hurts your business. So the reason for this image problem over lawyers' fees is largely due to many, many decades of poor billing practices which have been used throughout the profession. Some examples of those are lump sum billing, like just lump everything in one number with no detail. Unclear labeling, the client won't know what certain items are for. Surprise fees, which may impair the trust of your client if you suddenly last minute add something onto an invoice they're not aware of. And delayed invoicing for items that may have occurred months ago. That's what we call retroactive billing, trying to go back and bill for items that occurred quite a bit ago. These are traditional mistakes, just in terms of billing across the industry. And that has what's given many attorneys a bad rap in terms of their billing. So how do you fix that? Well, the fix is very simple. You do want to bring your billing practices especially in line with your client's expectations. And ways to do that are listed here. You want readable, accurate, descriptive labels for your major line items. That, of course, will reduce questions if they understand exactly what the charge is for. Billing regularly, monthly preferably, like everyone else. The reason being is because, one, it's fresh in their mind, the activity that you're doing, and also it's repetitive action. They're kind of expecting it every month, just like you get your phone bill or your credit card statement. It's something that's expected, it becomes a routine expense and is more likely to be addressed. If possible, you don't want to wait until the matter is completely closed to go back and start billing specific items. And of course, this does vary between fixed fee, contingency, and hourly. You want to review your invoices for errors or questionable items prior to sending them. Make sure you have a review process in place so that way it's not coming to your client's pointing out these errors. Not only does that come off as unprofessional, but you're very much aware of everything that's being sent to your client. Many times you may have a paralegal or secretary preparing the bill, goes out to the client. If you have no idea what's on it, you may have questions about some of those items, so be sure to review those. Record and show all charges. Even your waived or unbilled items, you want to show it on there. If you're saying, hey, no charge for this, make sure it shows up on the invoice. That will create some goodwill. And do not let your accounts receivable pile up. The longer a client does not pay you, the more likely there's going to be a dispute. So you want to be sure to send reminders and push to find out why the client is not paying. And I know that collections is something that many people try to avoid and not deal with, but if you're using technology, like we said, there are many tools that can make this much easier for you. So with that, just to give some examples of how to make this billing process easier, I'm going to just jump into Cosmolex real quick. Just a few items involved with billing that can definitely help to prevent these types of disputes. So first of all, when you're sending out your invoices, you do want to have your invoices set up in a way that is best for your clients, what they understand best, what's clear to them, and that comes down to your invoice templates in whatever tool that you're using. And here we have a section for invoice templates, and we have a whole list, what we call base templates, where you start, how much detail you want on here. And by far the most popular choice is the one I have highlighted, which includes all information, prior balances, and retainer replenishment amounts. There's no questions. I mean, there could be, but limited questions if you're providing all of that information. And then, of course, you can edit on top of that. There are even various settings like, do you want your transaction activity to show up on the invoice? Do you want the task in description? Do you want a cover page? All of these are ways for you to set up from the get-go how detailed you want to be with your clients so that going forward, every single client is handled the exact same way. It's like a set it and forget it. Set up your invoice templates and not worry about it going forward after that. Also, if you make your billing process easier, it's more likely it's going to happen on time, and also same thing goes for collections. So if I go under activities here, we have a function called bulk invoicing where I can actually generate invoices for all of my matters that have unbilled balances right here. So 30 invoices can go out in one click. Now, what's the important part about that? Well, if you can do them that quickly, it's much more likely to be done on the 1st or 2nd of the month and not 7th, 8th, maybe 10th of the month. Get them out that much sooner gives your client a little bit more time to pay. And get it in for that month, of course. Also for reviewing, not only can you go here and see what these items are, where's my mouse, here we go, you can see what is pertaining to this unbilled balance, let's say 3 or 4 time cards, but you also can take all these 30 invoices, save it into one Word doc or one PDF, and send it off to the attorney to say, hey, review this and let me know if any changes need to be made. And even after you've generated, you can go ahead and make changes and make sure they go out to the client properly. So that will definitely help in that review process. And the last part of definitely with the fee disputes is the collections. You want to stay on top of those collections, just like your billing. I always use the example of, let's say in a week from now, I'm billing for May. I want to do my collections for April. And if I could do both of them at the same time very quickly, even better. if I go here to right here, invoice reminders, this is going to pull up all of my overdue invoices. All right, I have a whole list here. I happen to have 27. All of my overdue items, this is the hardest part of this whole process, is figuring out who owes what by when. So if I could just select these people and go ahead and either I could call them or send a letter, but even better, I can just send an email straight from here. This has a message, lets them know their invoice is overdue, and attaches that invoice as a PDF. You can't get much simpler than that. In your office, in one action that takes a couple minutes, get out 100 reminders, let's say. So staying on top of that process is very important just to make sure that your invoices get paid on time and reduce the risk of getting these fee disputes if everything is much more routine and handled in a short period of time. Okay, so that takes us to our next item, which is communication breakdowns. Now, many times, a breakdown in communication can be the cause of many client disputes, and there are, of course, ways to prevent that. And first off is to keep your clients in the loop. It's very easy to fall into a trap of not communicating with a client, especially if there's little progress to report. But if you have long periods of just non-communication and this radio silence on your end, that will make your client suspicious, especially if you're charging, you know, a large fee for a certain task that you're doing and they're not hearing from you for a week or two. They're thinking, what is he doing to earn that fee? And that could bring you back to a fee dispute. Next is try to establish one primary method of communicating for each client, whether it's phone or email. Maybe they don't prefer phone. Maybe they do text. I mean, today's Skype, who knows? There's many different methods to communicate with your client. If you identify what their preference is, not only will you most likely get a response because it's in their preferred method of communication, but it will also make sure that you have a good paper trail. Maybe all the text communications, all the phone conversations, all the emails, everything is kept in one medium and is much more organized. But of course, if you have a client who prefers to text, maybe just text. Maybe that'll keep the communication open. But that just depends on your firm's policies, of course, and also your client's preferences. But that should all be discussed in initial consultation. And the next is organize your email communication. You definitely want that by matter, especially if your primary method is by email. Make sure you can produce an immediate paper trail. If a client complains that they're not being informed, which is very common amongst disputes, you weren't talking to them, you didn't let them know anything, you'll have a nice paper trail to work with. So that's why it's usually preferred to do either email, letters, text, as opposed to phone calls, because there's a nice paper trail to support exactly the communication that happened. So one recent add-on that we had in Cosmolex, which is extremely useful, is an email integration. What this does is we integrate with any of your email providers, Outlook, Gmail. You could just forward your emails into the system, and they will all show up here and auto-tag based off of the client's email address. So you see I have all of my email messages here. I have the client and matter, very easily seen. Now this is of course on my full firm level, so it's a mixture of a whole bunch of messages. But let's say I'm working on a particular matter. All right, and I want to go ahead here and let's say go into this matter. I have this 365 view, which I'll get into a little bit later on, but everything's listed here, but also emails. I see all the communication that I have had with Jim Collins related to his consultation case. I can quickly pull up an email and say, hey, I asked them to respond to this particular matter. They did not respond, or they did, and this was their response. Everything's here in a neat, organized manner selected by each matter. It needs to be organized, that's the key part. Missed deadlines. Now, deadlines have real consequences, sometimes so severe that they just cannot be missed. You could have everything from a deadline about you need to call somebody by a certain time, or you may need to have something filed by a certain time, no questions asked, or court date. I mean, there's many things that vary in severity. And this area definitely gets complicated because the delays can be caused by factors outside of just the client and the attorney. It could be items outside of your control, like government agencies, banks, insurance companies, they may be delaying whatever process you're trying to complete. So this is, again, an area where technology can really help. Reasons being is you can keep your calendar within your case management system. And like I showed you, and I'll show you once again, having everything in one view for that matter, you could see all the appointments, the tasks, the deadlines, all really easily. Make sure your calendar and task tracking systems talk to each other. You want to make sure that all of your events, your tasks, your items that might have a due date associated with it are all talking to each other and easily syncing. Use a team calendar so that everyone in your firm is aware how their individual tasks affect an overall project. When you delegate, which is something that you really want to do, it's a great leadership function, but it can prevent a logjam. Because if you don't have a good view as to how that delegation is being handled, say you gave somebody a task, you have no idea if they completed it, that could cause a big issue. So you want to be able to delegate events or tasks to other people in your firm, but also be able to see the progress of those items and how that's moving along so that you're not surprised at the end that, hey, a deadline was missed. You want to monitor deadlines and events, as I mentioned, for the entire team. The whole firm is in trouble if something goes wrong. So even if it's just one attorney or paralegal that happened to miss one particular deadline, it's going to affect the entire firm. So it's good to be on top of those type of things. And of course, use a mobile solution. Everyone is spending less time in front of their physical computer. So having mobile access helps everyone to get more accomplished on a daily basis. That could be on your smartphone, your tablet, or maybe even your laptop in another location. Being able to handle all of that wherever you are is a big help. So with that, let me just show you a couple solutions, what could be very helpful by having an all-in-one system like Cosmolex. The built-in calendar. So if I go, I'm actually going to go to the activity level and go to the calendar here. This is my full calendar. I've got everything listed here. Could be for the firm, could be just for me, but I have everything listed. And you see at the bottom left, I have a team calendar, which I created, which could be, let's say, where your inter-office meetings go, anything related to the firm internally can go, and then I have access to other user calendars here. So depending on permissions, you could say whose calendar you can and cannot access. So that's the first part, and definitely promotes that team environment, being able to see everything that's going on. Also, if I go ahead here and add an event, a couple things are happening here. I'm able to link the item to first any calendar that I want. I can add it to somebody else's calendar, and I could also link it directly to a matter. This is what takes this past just your generic Google or Outlook calendar. When you have it within your case management system, you're able to tie everything together, and everything will be very neat under each and every matter so you don't lose track of anything. I can also say that this is billable. Now, this will come back in a future slide that I'm going to talk about, but being able to bill from your events, tasks, emails, that also is very important in defending yourself against a fee dispute. And your tasks. You want to be able to have not just events assigned to various people, but what are my task items? If I add a particular task in here, I want to be able to say that this is assigned to somebody else in the firm, and I have an option here, send an email when task is completed. So let's say I'm assigning a task to my paralegal and saying this needs to be done by this date. If I'm not notified, it has not been completed. So it's something to keep me in the loop without having to be in here every single day knowing what's going on. And of course you could set status and priority, all of that. You also can create workflows. So if you happen to have a standardized checklist for a particular matter type, this is a great feature, and that's right here in our setup section. Let's say you have real estate matters. Well, let's go ahead and create a workflow that's got, in this case, 5 different tasks where you can go ahead and add them all here. You could say when they're due and in relation to each other. You know, is it a couple days after, before? One of these items need to be completed, and this can be attached to the matter when it comes up. So you can create, let's say, a real estate workflow, 10 items have to be done. Real estate matter comes up, just attach it. Those 10 items won't be missed, and they will be assigned with due dates. All right, so the next item we'll talk about, and this is kind of what I was leaning into, is tracking time in context. This is very important, and a lot of times, especially if you're using different tools like your email and Outlook, your billing in a billing software, your accounting somewhere else, your tasks on a piece of paper, it's very easy to forget what your original source of your billing is. If you cannot figure out or define why you billed in the first place, or if it takes too long for you to figure that out, that's a disadvantage to you. And if there's a fee dispute or anything like that, or maybe just a dispute in general, that is going to be in your client's favor if you can't actually provide proof as to why you're billing for certain items. So you want to be able to record time against events, tasks, emails, any activity that you do that you are billing for, you want to be able to track it. So one thing I want to show you that, and I did show that a little bit in the email, is the ability to bill for various items. So if I go back to my email tab here, I can select any every email that I have in the system, and I can add a time card right here. These items that have a clock on it, you'll see it says time recorded. The ones that have a dollar bill say they're billable, and the ones with the check means they've been billed. So you get a really good idea as to the status of these various items. Same thing happens when you're in your task list. You'll see I have these items over here as well. I could bill directly from here. Same thing for notes, events, keeps everything in the loop. On the flip side, if I'm looking at my time and expense card list, I can also see what time card is associated to an email, what time card might be associated to an event, or a task, or a note. These little icons here are telling me that's associated to another item. So if they question this particular, let's say that the task or description is kind of vague, they're not sure what you're talking about, you could see that this is linked to a particular note or calendar event and seek additional detail in a quick, organized manner, which will reflect on you very positively. All right. Also, in terms of our billing within our system, if you forget to bill, like say you mark something billable and you forget to bill for it, this is more of an internal benefit, but it will show up on your dashboard on an area here called Money Finder. So by having everything together, your calendaring, your billing, your accounting, that is just so powerful to you because you're going to have to bill for a consultation you had at 2 o'clock. You're going to have to bill for that brief that you had prepared by, yesterday. Who's going to remember to bill for it? That might just completely get lost in the shuffle. So by marking it as billable, it'll show up here. If it has not been billed, you can go ahead and address it. And ideally, you want this to be completely empty. That means that all of your items have been addressed. Okay, and this is a big one, and this is the last one that we're going to be covering right now, and this is mishandled finances. For many years, practice management, billing, and accounting were completely isolated from each other. This, of course, brings computers into a situation that didn't really improve things because then you'd have separate programs for each function. So though certain tasks became a little more automated, they're still in separate systems. But they're very tightly connected. Everything overlaps. Your calendaring, your billing, accounting, even trust accounting, all of these items do have overlap at some point. So here are 4 absolute requirements to avoid dispute over your finances. And you need to take these fiduciary responsibilities seriously, or you could risk losing your license or your license to practice law. So what always it comes down to is the law firm is fiduciary responsible. So that means doesn't matter if you have outsourced help, a secretary, a temp, doesn't matter who's working for you. At the end of the day, the partners, the attorneys, the firm are the ones responsible for these finances to be correct. So first off, all client funds must be accounted for and reported to the clients, and that includes client retainer balances. This is a big one, whether it's a trust retainer or in certain states you may have operating retainers. The client should be informed of that. They should get their invoice and know how much of their money you have remaining. Also, expenses must be shown, whether it's a hard cost, a soft cost, which is meaning overhead, or a direct filing fee type of charge. No matter what, it needs to show up on the invoice. They should be able to see a clear, itemized breakdown of all the expenses. Credit card payments must be properly batched and reconciled. This is something that many firms accept credit cards, but they don't think of the extra accounting responsibility that you have. You need to make sure that you have everything batched properly, which means, let's say over the weekend, 10 clients paid their bills, which would be fantastic. They paid it online by credit card, all this money went into your operating bank, great. You have a $10,000 deposit. Now who is that for? Which clients, which invoices, how would you know? So being able to batch those items within your system will help you to better reconcile and know who did what when. And like I said, you may have multiple clients pay online in a given day, which is a great situation, but you need to be able to figure out which of those clients paid. And of course, you need to keep your trust books current and squeaky clean. That's a big one. You're dealing with client funds. So that does vary by state, of course, as to what your compliance requirements may be. But there are federal guidelines as well. And it's your responsibility alone to be aware of what the federal and state guidelines are as to how to handle your trust funds. So you need to make sure that you're taking that responsibility on properly. So to give a couple examples of the financial aspect, the first thing I'll show you is when I'm on the matter page, you'll notice I have all of my matters listed, but I also have these 4 balances to the right: unpaid, unbilled, and any retainers. Very, very, not just important, but very convenient, because if at any point in time a client calls in and say, hey, do I owe you any money, or I don't think I owe you money, or whatever the question, you could see right away what that unpaid balance is. Or, well, what's my upcoming bill going to be? Because I want to know. Here you know exactly what the next bill is approximately going to be, because that's your unbilled amount. How much of my money do you have in trust? Right here I know right away. So those top questions are going to be answered very quickly. You also want to be able to, like I said, have the separate retainer balance on an invoice. And I'll give you a quick example of that. I have a paid invoice here, actually, that I'm just going to show you exactly what I mean. This is a paid invoice. It has a $0 balance. Nothing's owed, but you will see on this invoice that we have that separate line item here, retainer balance as of, with the date that the invoice was generated, or printed, I should say. So here is that remaining amount. That is very important to keep your clients in the loop, again, making sure they're aware of all the funds that they have. You want to have those separate expenses on the invoice. No real need to show you that, but you just want to make sure, in addition to your time cards, you do have your expenses itemized. I did mention credit card batching as well. We do integrate with LawPay, in which you can receive your credit card payments and then batch the deposits together. So if I go to my bank, just to show you what I mean by batching, and I go to one of these operating banks here, I can go and create a deposit slip. Now, of course, you can create a deposit slip for your checks that you might be depositing at the bank as well, but also you can combine your credit card payments. I can go right here, well, batch, I don't happen to have any right now, but I can batch all my credit cards right at the same time, and everything gets processed properly. If I go to reconcile, I'll see that I have a $10,000 batch of my credit cards, and it makes everything more streamlined internally, but also if something were to be questioned, you're like, I know exactly when that got deposited. On this day there was that $10,000 deposit. Quick and simple. And of course, very important, you want to make sure to have your trust reconciliation and reporting. Now, that comes down to the type of solution you're using. If you're using a general accounting solution to handle your trust accounting, you have to take on the responsibility of making sure you're following those proper guidelines, because programs like QuickBooks or Quicken, they're not built for attorneys, so they're not going to have trust accounting built in. So you need to take on that responsibility to make sure you're using the programs in the best way possible. Now with the legal solution, of course, that's a great benefit to you, because you don't have to worry about handling these items properly. As I mentioned before, you could see your retainer balances very easily. In this system, you can't overdraft on your ledger. I can't cut, for instance, a $3,000 check for this matter. It will not let me. I can print my checks. I can do my reconciliation. I can do my three-way reconciliation report. That is what's needed if you get audited. So like I said, You can use whatever solution you feel most comfortable using, but you need to make sure that you take on that responsibility that your trust books especially are handled the best way possible. That really comes down to audit time. You want to prevent having to have any sort of issues if you were to get a trust account audit. All right, so just to sum up a little bit, better practice management. Like I've said, organization is the key to everything. It creates a climate that fosters improved accuracy, and your practice, of course, needs to juggle dozens, if not hundreds, of simultaneous details and tasks. Each may even have their own priorities, so doing that manually, it just can't happen in an effective manner. Computerized practice management is a necessity to keep everything on track, like I said. You want to be sure you have that 365 view of the practice, whether it's, like I mentioned, that matter detail view, being able to see time cards, invoices, transactions, events, emails, all in one window is a huge benefit to you, because if that person calls in and says, hey, I have a question, you're not digging. You're not trying to find the answer. You're not saying, I'll call you back in another day. You'll have that answer right at your fingertips. You want to have a comprehensive conflict checking system to avoid any future problems at the time of client intake. That all comes down to being able to record your spouses, relatives, expert witnesses, opposing attorneys, being able to record that as a contact in your system, so that way when there's a search, you will see that that is linked to the matter. And in our case, it's a relation on that matter. Instead of you searching for dates and events, it's all presented to you. Like I said, if you have that matter view especially, you're not digging. Everything's available to you right away and very simply. You want good case notes within the system, not post-it notes everywhere, loose sheets of paper. I'm with you guys where I love to write down on paper, but those papers get lost, they get thrown out, coffee gets spilled on them, things happen. If you have it all in the computer system, whatever software you're using, it just makes everything much easier for you. And of course your documents. You want your documents organized by matter as well, and that's one of the tabs that we had in that matter details section. So again, everything in one area. So now that we looked at several ways to prevent your disputes, we know that the disputes will arise nonetheless. So you don't want to get caught blindsided and just trying to figure it out or wing it. You want to make sure you have a plan in place. Some things are not preventable. They're inevitable. They're going to come up. So you need to make sure that you already know how you're going to handle it. So once you've set up systems like the ones we've just covered, make sure you know how to use them to settle your disputes. You may know great how to put calendar events in your system, but you don't know how to pull it up by that matter or by a date. So you need to be able to retrieve the information just as easily as you're able to put it in. That allows you to respond much quicker because, like I said, delays will only make the matter worse. All-inclusive systems are a big help. Cosmex is an example of that, where you can have your emails, documents, calendar events, notes, also your billing, trust accounting, and business accounting all together, which is great to have an all-in-one, but for organizational purposes, it could definitely make things much simpler. And a little reminder here, today we covered client disputes, but do remember to plan for other types of disputes as well. You could have disputes with your local IOLTA requirements, like I mentioned, at audit time, or if you were to overdraft or anything like that, depending on how your ethics board is set up. You want to keep an eye out for that. And disputes over IRS or state tax authority requirements. We're not here going to cover how you need to record your taxes, but at the end of the day, you're a business in addition to being an attorney. So you need to make sure that you're filing your taxes properly as well.